Hello, everyone. Tonight we're taking a trip back to ancient Rome, not to a battlefield or a palace, but to the most unsung of places, the muddy fields where farmers worked hard to feed the empire. You won't be a general or an emperor. No, tonight you're a peasant. And let's be honest, you probably won't last a week. You don't have coffee. You don't have an alarm clock, but a rooster with questionable accuracy. Your back has been aching since you were 15, and you sometimes dream of a life of luxury, only to be woken up by mosquitoes. So before you get too comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I do here. And comment with your location and local time. We're always curious to know where and when you're listening. Now, turn off the lights, turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's start our night journey together. You wake up to the sound of a rooster screeching like a siren, not a mighty cock-a-doodle-doo, but a shrill, get to work or get beaten by the boss sound. You turn gently on the flat, dry bread-like straw mattress, trying not to groan at the pain in your back, a back that Saturn would probably rub sympathetically. The ceiling is low. Last night's smoke still lingers, like a clumsy ghost. You reach for the ceramic pot by the bed and take a sip of the cool water. Earthy. Good as usual. Inside, your wife whispers to your eldest daughter to light the fire, while your son remains wrapped like a mummy in his woolen blanket. You give him a gentle kick, a loving and dutiful one. Early plowing leaves time to sprinkle, you say, a phrase that has been repeated by thousands of Roman farmers before you. Outside, the early morning air is thick and cold as a frog's skin. You slip into leather slippers that are as worn as your faith in authority. The ground is dark, but you can see the faint outline of the Aventine Hill in the distance, where the gods, or at least the nobles, still snore. You step out into the yard, where the chickens are fighting over something you don't want to know. Your dog, named Canis, because you're not in the mood for fancy names, shakes himself, then follows you out to the cowshed. The first job of the day is to check on the cows. Two of them, one female, one male, are as lazy as statues. You herd them out of the pen, mumbling a half-hearted prayer to Ceres, the goddess of agriculture, who you believe only cares for wealthy farmers. A little fact you remember from your father's time. In 63 BC, the empire had encouraged offering bread to Ceres to bring rain. You tried it. It didn't work, but at least you got to eat bread. You rest the plow on your shoulder, the wood heavy as regret. On the dirt road leading to the fields, you and your son pass a row of olive trees dotted with dew. Tiny drops of water cling to your shirt, as cold as the look of the postman when you say, "I didn't bring any tax money today." Here's the field. The soil looks good, with a few rocks, but it's still the landlord's land, which means it's not yours. Historians still debate whether most Roman farmers were tenant farmers like you, or whether a small percentage owned their own land, but the records are incomplete. You don't care. All you know is that you plowed it and someone else reaped the benefits. As you plow, you hear the birds and your own guts rumbling. A little story comes to mind. When you were a kid, you stole a grape from a market basket. Your mother caught you. Instead of spanking you, she made you plant a grapevine, which you tended for 3 years. Now, the vine is still in the backyard, and its grapes are as sour as your childhood sin. When you look up, the sun is out. Its orange light filters through the mist, illuminating your skin in an unpleasant way. You have no sunscreen, just a straw hat and hope. Fun fact, the Romans used a homemade sunscreen made from ash, olive oil, and crocodile dung. Not you. You're not stupid. When it's time to take a break, you lean on your hoe and look at the field like a living painting. A bit boring. A gentle breeze blows through, making the rice grass sway like ocean waves. You find it beautiful. Then you remember that you have to cut it all down next month. You turn to your son, signaling that it's time for a drink of water. You both sit down on a large rock near the edge of the field, which used to be the boundary between the two villages. Someone says that underneath the rock is a piece of pottery engraved with the name of a judge from the Republic. You dig. All you find is a snake. A small bell rings in the distance, signaling from a local shrine that the second hour of the day is about to begin. A long day in store, and you still haven't had a proper breakfast. But that's okay, because you're a Roman peasant, the one the Empire forgot existed. Your breakfast is no Caesar's feast. There are no runny eggs or organic granola with chia seeds. Just a piece of bread as hard as a bathroom tile, a piece of goat cheese older than your slippers, and a sip of warm water from a clay pot that has cracked once in a minor earthquake last year. You chew slowly, as if trying to negotiate with your teeth. They protest. A left back tooth throbs like a small knife stuck in your gum. You glance at your son. He chews like a machine, without complaint. Youth really doesn't appreciate healthy teeth. You think back to when you were his age. The same fields, the same bread, except there was no cheese. Your wife is sitting there mending a quilt, her hair a tangle. It's cold today, she says without looking up. You nod, holding your tongue as the bread gets stuck in your teeth. The morning wind begins to creep in through the cracks in the door. Someone sneezes next door. It's the month of Martius, and the air is cold and old people's bones are like rotten wood. You start to cough, and your wife gives you a piece of basil to suck on. You're not sure what it does, other than make you stop coughing while you're busy spitting. Every morning is the same, but never boring enough that you don't notice new details. A hen lays an egg in your empty basket. A dead mouse lies on its back, seemingly enjoying the morning, and the neighbor scolding of her son for looking at other people's sons working hard and learning. You are the example. You stand up, brushing the dust off your shirt. Come on, there's work to do, you say, as if someone were about to object. Outside, the sun begins to cast soft streaks on the ground like thinned honey. You step through them, remembering that you must check the eastern fence today. Last time, there were tracks of something that looked like wild boar, or the next villager pretending to be wild boar. Both are equally terrifying. On your way to the fields, you meet Licinia, a widow at the end of the village who keeps sprinkling salt on her paths, believing it will ward off her ex-husband's spirit. You greet her, and she responds with a half-smile and 2 words. Plowing again? You nod. It could be a greeting, or it could be a taunt. You don't dare ask. When you get there, your son has tied the oxen to the plow. You put your hand on his shoulder, gently, and adjust the rope, not because it's wrong, but because you want to. Being a father gives you that right. You begin to plow. The ground is not smooth, but it is not too bad either. Each time the plow cuts, you feel a little satisfaction. It is the soil, the flesh and blood of the crop, and you're back, sacrificing so much for this soil. A few minutes later, you hear someone calling. It's Publius, your neighbor to the west, waving you over. You quicken your pace, knowing that a morning invitation is never just for conversation. Here, he says, eyes darting. Word from the market. Taxes are up this year. Not grain this time, but goats. You frown. Goats? Yeah, they said the goats were for the soldiers. And you have 3, right? You sigh. Did the empire really need your goats? Historians still argue whether Roman taxes were as brutal as Tacitus makes them out to be, or whether they were just intellectual exaggerations. You don't need to argue. You see the consequences every time the tax collectors come knocking. Back in the field, you notice that your wife has brought you a small bag, the luxury portion of your breakfast, burnt on the bottom porridge. You take it, eating spoonfuls with your hands. Hot and mushy, but warm. You chew slowly, remembering the times your father told you about Saturn escaping from the sky, living among men, and teaching them to plow the fields. You think that if he were alive, he would say, "Son, don't trust the gods unless they do a plowing session for you." Birds fly over your head, a flock of starlings, black as ink on parchment. You wonder if any of them have stolen your seeds. Your son giggles when a bird shits on your shoulder. You don't laugh. You quietly gather a reed and remember what your wife said. It's a sign of good luck. You've never seen anyone get rich because of bird shit, but you haven't aged any faster because of it. It's even. You finish your morning plowing and look back at the neat furrows. Not bad. You turn around and head home, at least to wash your face and apply some mutton fat to the blister on your hand. Amidst the aching of your muscles and the dirt clinging to your skin, you keep a small smile on your face. The day has begun and you're still alive, with dry bread, burnt porridge, and a cow that walks upright. That's victory. The well at the entrance of the village was never as charming as it was in the poems. There were no girls in white dresses singing as they drew water. There was no crystal clear foam. There was only a rotten wooden bucket, frayed rope, and the smell of moss-like shoes that had been wet for 2 days. But that was where you went right after plowing in the morning, with blisters on your hands and a thorn scratch on the back of your hand. You didn't even remember when you got it. You lean over the well, drawing up bucketfuls of water. It's a murky brown stream, but cold and not quite rusty. You splash it on your face, exhaling like you've just come back from a summer hell. A childhood friend once told you that drinking cold water right after work would stop your heart. You tried it. It still beat. But your teeth hurt. So you drank it slowly, like you were tasting wine. An old man with a cane walks by, his beard long and tangled like a bird's nest. "When I was younger, this well had sweet water," he says without being asked. "Now it's just Licinia's sewage." You nod, unsure if it's true or just another curse of time. Back home, your wife is preparing the vegetables for lunch. A bunch of spinach, a few spring onions, and a head of garlic as soft as a memory. She arranges them on a stone cutting board and begins to chop them with a knife, so dull you suspect it's a ceremonial tool. You reach for a handful of salt, sprinkling it on like a chef competing on a cooking show. If that show were called "Who Can Still Eat Wins." Your daughter is sweeping the floor, each sweep kicking up enough dust to choke a cavalry. You hold in your cough, trying to pretend this is old Roman air. Canis lies in the corner, eyes glazed over as if he's tired of the smell of garlic. You take the opportunity to repair the door that has been stuck since last winter. The wood is warped, the hinge is rusty, and each time you open it, it makes a loud squeak sound, like someone is complaining. As you turn the screw with an old iron bar, you suddenly think of a strange rumor in the village. If you hear the door creak exactly 3 times at dusk, it might be Laurus, the guardian god of the home, wanting to tell you something. You heard exactly 3 creaks, but it turns out it was the neighbor's kid playing hide and seek in your barn. As you mumble, your son comes running in, breathing heavily. "Father, someone from the city is here." You jump up, your knees cracking in warning. People from the city usually come to your village for 2 reasons: to collect taxes or to find soldiers. You hope it's not both. You and your wife go to the door. Sure enough, there's a man wearing an extra clean tunic, carrying a wax tablet and a sharp pen. He claims to be an employee of the Census Bureau, sent to take a census of the population and property. A true historical fact. Every 5th year, the Romans held a census, not just to count people, but also to determine military service and taxes. You know, the year before, you pretended to be crippled to get out of service. They didn't believe you. You still had to serve for a month. Then you were sent home because you were too short. The man takes careful notes, asking about age, occupation, number of livestock, and the condition of his teeth. You look at your wife, then smile. None have fallen out. You say, coughing. He takes notes, nods, and walks off to the next house like an administrative wind. You breathe a sigh of relief. Then you remember that this afternoon you have to take your son to the land up north, where you plant some beans in case of bad harvests. The name is catchy, but it's really just a few rows of barren soil with rocks across them. On the way, your son asks, "Dad, why don't we move to the city?" You laugh, because the city doesn't have any fields for us to plow. You have to plow other people's fields there. That's not a joke. Historians still debate whether peasant life in the suburbs was better or worse than the life of a Roman urban worker. Some argue that the city offered more opportunity, but the trade-off was overcrowding, pollution, and robbery rates so high they were normalized. You'd rather stay, where you at least know which hen is laying eggs today. You reach the bean field and inspect the bushes. A few small flowers are blooming. That's a good sign. You pick a young pod and let your son taste it. He grimaces. Bitter. You know it. That's how you survive. As you're surveying the ground, you hear the sound of hooves. In the distance, a group of Roman soldiers are approaching, not in a hurry, but enough to make you feel the need to step aside. They don't look at you. Just walk straight, silently, with their eyes fixed on a place beyond the limits of your understanding. You shiver, not from the cold, but because you know somewhere there's a war going on, and if you're not careful, your son will be next. On the way back, the sky had turned a pale yellow. The wind was light, carrying the smell of straw, smoke, and a little pride. You are not a hero, but you are the reason the Empire can survive another season. You return home as the sun hovers between the horizon and the sky, as if it is also hesitating whether to end the day or give you a few more hours of work. The wind blows through the old roof tiles, whining like the lament of a wooden chair that has been sitting on too long. You walk through the yard, where Canis still lies motionless like an unemployed statue of Anubis. His eyes glance lazily at you, his tail twitching as if to say, "Oh, you're back? Did you plow anything?" Your wife has lit the fire, smoke curling from a clay chimney, like an invitation to empty stomachs. In the pot is a mixture the Romans called pulse, a barley porridge cooked with vegetables and herbs. You call it lifesaver. Not good, not bad, just enough to survive. But today there's the smell of meat. What kind of meat? You don't ask. You know you don't want to know. Your lunch, like every other day, is a miniature version of the dinner you'll have after sunset. Porridge, bread, a few vegetables, and silence shared like wine. The girl hums something, a tune without words, but somehow related to chicks. You wonder how she manages to keep her voice cheerful in this fractured world. There's news from the barracks, your wife says softly, as if afraid to spill her porridge. They say they might build a new road across the southern plains. You swallow your porridge, wincing at the ginger. A new road means work, forced labor, construction taxes, officials swarming into the village like mosquitoes looking for a bloodsucker. You remember your grandfather's words. When the Romans built the road, the poor had to carry the stones. This event, though it hasn't happened yet, was part of a series of Augustan-era infrastructure expansions, a network of roads stretching tens of thousands of kilometers that moved armies quickly and merchants spread culture. Sounds grand, unless you're the one carrying each stone. After lunch, you take a nap, a short nap, like a long blink of an eye. But just as you're about to drift off to sleep, the jingling of a wine vendor echoes from the edge of the village. A shrill voice shouts, "Good wine from Persia. Drink a glass and forget your sorrows." You roll around in the straw, trying to ignore it, but your son comes running out with a coin you guessed he stole from the money jar. You step out into the back, where you usually do alone things, like check your mousetraps, sharpen your plow, or ponder the brevity of your youth. Near the base of an old fig tree, you discover a new fire ant nest. You watch them for a while. They work with military discipline, without complaint, without laziness, without asking for time off between shifts. You sigh softly. If only humans were like that. Then you step on their nest, not out of disgust, but because you need the space to sit. When you return, your son is grimacing after taking a sip of the street liquor. "Why did you drink?" you ask, half angry, half amused. He shrugs, his eyes red. "I thought it would make me strong." You look at him for a long moment, then hold his head and say, "Being strong is not drinking without grimacing. Being strong is getting up every morning, going to the fields, and not giving up when the ground is too hard to plow." The afternoon passes with the task of spreading manure, an activity both smelly and philosophical. Who first thought of this? You ask yourself. Some modern scholars believe that ancient Roman farmers had a surprisingly effective fertilizer system that included ashes, animal manure, and even human urine. The idea is controversial, but you don't argue. You just know you're doing it. The pungent smell clings to your skin like the perfume of tragedy. You joke that if someone could distill it, it would be called essence to surviving. Your wife hates the smell, but she also hates that you're sick from not working. So, one more point for the smell of shit. You wash your hands under the water trough, where a frog sits as a guardian against bad smells. It stares at you, then hops away, leaving a splash of water on your shirt. You laugh dryly. "Thanks, little buddy. Now my shirt smells better." The sun begins to set, and the light shifts from golden yellow to burnt orange. You feel everything slowing down, as if the universe itself needs a break. A late rooster crows, a village idiot who never knows the time. You wonder if anyone has studied the internal clocks of ancient chickens. Historians still debate the exact work schedule of Roman peasants. How many hours a day? Did they rest? You know your schedule until your hands give out, or until dark, whichever comes first. You walk back into the house, your legs tired but your mind strangely clear. Your wife has lit the fire, the flames dancing on the walls, casting you into a silent giant. Dinner is ready. Not much different from lunch, but you don't complain. In ancient Rome, 2 meals a day was a sign that you hadn't hit rock bottom. And today, you're still on rock bottom a little. "Are we going to work tomorrow?" your son asks. You laugh. "What will we eat if we don't work?" he nods, as if the sentence is both a curse and a truth. You lie back on the softest straw, listening to the wind whistling through the cracks in the door, the crackling of the wood in the hearth, and the steady breathing of those you love. You are not Caesar. You have no great victory, but you have one day, one more day. You wake up to a sky that hasn't yet decided what color it's going to be. A quiet blue-gray covers everything like Grandma's old blanket. No roosters crow, which always makes you nervous. When roosters are quiet, there's usually either a fox or trouble, and trouble always finds its way home. You tiptoe out of the hay, past the sleeping child, one leg sticking out like bread off a tray. Without waking anyone, you head straight out into the yard. The smell of morning dew mixes with the fumes of dried manure, creating a scent so familiar that if someone bottled it, you would buy it reluctantly. Canis is lying next to the chicken coop, eyes half open as if he's just signed a contract with a nightmare. You give him a gentle kick in the butt. "Go see what's wrong with your chickens." He gets up slowly, stretches his legs like a cat, and then shuffles off to check. You follow, clutching a small knife at his side. Inside the coop, you see a sight that makes you frown. 3 hens, flattened, covered in feathers, and clearly dead. You look at the footprints in the dirt, small, long, messy indentations. Weasels. Weasels, that's for sure. You sigh. 3 more days of missing eggs. One more reason to hate Roman country life. You bury the chickens in your backyard, not out of ritual, but because the smell of corpses invites 100 things worse than weasels. After you've cleaned up the mess from the night before, you return home just in time for your wife to prepare breakfast. Barley bread and a rare bit of honey that the neighbors bartered from a Greek wine merchant. It's one of the few luxuries you can enjoy this year. You share a portion with your child, then lick your fingers. This is what heaven tastes like. You whisper, like a philosopher analyzing taste buds. As you eat, your wife tells you about someone in your village who has been drafted into the army. A young, healthy man, recently married. Now he must leave his village to serve in Dacia. You frown. Conscription is an undesirable experience, especially for peasants. Despite their name, they defend the empire. But in reality, you know, most of them defend distant provinces you've never heard of. Some historians still debate whether conscription of peasants is socially efficient, since it often disrupts production and leaves entire families in limbo. You pick up your hoe and head for the riverbank, where the soil is soft and moist. This is where the vegetables grow: lettuce, onions, coriander, and something you call red cabbage, because you've never remembered its Latin name. Farming along the riverbank is a blessing, easy to irrigate, easy to fertilize, but also vulnerable to floods. Like the flood 2 years ago, which washed away your entire mustard field and left you eating rice porridge for nearly a month. This morning, as you replant some beds, you think about last night's dream. A big party, full of wine and fire girls. You smile to yourself. Your mind is starting to dream like that of the poet Virgil. I must have eaten too much porridge yesterday, you say to yourself. As you dig, you hear the sound of a cart in the distance. A small caravan of merchants carrying purple-dyed cloth, hides, and wine. You straighten up, wipe your sweat, and wave to them. These men have traveled from Britannia to Gaul, and then down to Hispania. You have heard that they speak 5 languages, and know where the sweetest grapes are in Europe. You trade a leather strap and a small knife, old but in good condition, for a few bunches of fresh herbs. You don't know who got the better deal, but judging by the merchant's smile, you're inclined to say not you. At noon, you sit under an olive tree, looking up at the sky, filled with clouds as thin as giant tablecloths. You remember a story your father once told you. Long ago, the olive tree was a gift from the goddess Athena, a symbol of peace and wisdom. You are not sure about peace, but sitting under its shade, you feel strangely at peace. You take a bite of the cake, feeling ashy. You think of patrician feasts, all-night feasts with dancing girls, dice games, and dishes with mythical names: roasted peacock tongue, steamed whale brains. You wonder, did the rich ever sit under olive trees, eat dry cake, and dream of a simple life? Canis falls asleep again, this time on your lap. You stroke his head gently, feeling the thick fur as warm as a living blanket. You whisper, do you dream too? Of catching weasels? Or of being a royal dog? In the afternoon, you go back to the fields to pull weeds. It's the most boring job in the universe, but it's also the time when your mind is the most free. You think about your son, about the future, about whether you can save enough to buy another cow. Small dreams, but to you, they're as big as the Colosseum. Before dark, you come home. Your wife is sewing a torn shirt. Your daughter is learning to count by stacking beans. Your son is trying to draw a boat with charcoal on a mud wall, a scene you want to engrave in your heart. Nothing is perfect, but everything is in place. You eat dinner by the flickering light of an oil lamp, the faint smell of smoke seeping into your hair, your clothes, your memories. Then you talk softly to your wife about the fields, about dead chickens, about news from the soldiers. She just nods, her eyes already drowsy with sleep. You lie down, cover yourself with a rough cloth, and close your eyes. In your head you hear the sound of the waves from the distant river, the wind in the trees, Canis's wheezing breath, and a sound you can't hear, the sound of another day passing in silence. You wake up in darkness as thick as unfermented grape ink. It's strangely quiet, so quiet that you reach up to feel your heart beating. Beating. Fast. Something's wrong. You hear a faint rattle, like someone trying to open a cage door. You sit up, your hand instinctively reaching for the small knife under your pillow. Canis hasn't barked yet. Even stranger, you crept to the door and peeked out. There was nothing but darkness and a faint glow from the moon behind the clouds. But then you saw someone running by, small and agile. A thief. But not a thief. The barn was still intact. A thief of dung. It sounds funny, but it's true. Some villagers, especially the lazy ones or those who don't own livestock, occasionally steal manure to fertilize their fields. You sigh. You'll have to build more fences, or at least make some simple traps out of barbed wire. As the sun rises, you start the day in a slightly grumpy mood. You shoulder your hoe and head out to the fields. But today is not the day to farm. Today is your turn to help maintain the village roads, a rotating duty called a munera. Although you don't volunteer, the laws of the Roman-controlled village are clear. Each family must contribute to the upkeep of the common infrastructure. You and 3 others dig a ditch on the side of the dirt road. The work is no different than digging a grave, except that this grave has no one in it. Sweat soaks your clothes, mud sticks to your feet, and you begin to think, if there's a next life, I wish I could be a goose. Eat grass, waddle, cry loudly, and no one will ask me to dig a road. A light rain fell mid-morning, softening the ground and making it heavier, but it also helped to cool the heat. One of the group, the oldest, said that when Caesar was alive, he had his men build 100 miles of roads in a single dry season. Modern historians still debate whether that figure is an exaggeration, but you just wish someone would make your shovel half as heavy. During lunch breaks, people share food. One person brings goat cheese, so hard you could chew a horse with it. Another has raisins carefully wrapped in fig leaves. You have a piece of sausage that has been smoked for weeks, a little sour, but still edible. If you don't sniff it too hard, the conversation turns to rumors of a new tax. A tax on livestock. Your heart rate quickens as if you're racing a horse. You have only 1 cow and 1 sow, and now they're being taxed? A pot-bellied farmer waves his hand and says, I heard in some places people are taxed for having toilets. You laugh, then pause. Could it be true? At the end of the day, when you return home, you find a sight that makes your blood boil like wine left out in the sun. Your eldest son is being pulled by the ears and scolded by a local guard for kicking the base of an emperor's bust. It's just a broken block of stone placed at the village crossroads, but it bears the image of Augustus, one of the first emperors and revered as a near-divine being. You run over, bow your head in apology, and reach out to pull your child back. The guard looks at you for a long time, then says in a voice as cold as winter, one more time. He won't just get scolded. You nod, your back sweating, your heart pounding like a drum. The child understands, and you see tears falling from his eyes. You don't blame him. His legs don't even extend past his knees. How could he understand that politics and divinity are mixed together like flour and water in bread? That evening, you repair the back fence, adding barbed wire and a few wooden hooks to make a simple trap. Your wife brings out a bowl of bean soup, sets it aside, and sits down next to you. "Do you think our child understands the danger?" she asks. You remain silent, unsure. You don't fully understand it yourself. Before you go inside, you look up at the sky. A shooting star streaks by, as if in the blink of an eye from some god. You close your eyes, not wishing for anything. You just stand there, listening to the wind whistling in your ears, listening to Canis barking into the darkness. This time it's real, not a dream. No one's taking the shit. Just a fox passing by, and no one's hurt. That's at this time. You lie down on the straw bed. Pull the sheet up to your chest. Close your eyes. Your mind detangle. Tomorrow there might be new taxes. There might be another kid kicking an idol. There might be a storm. Or nothing. But the only thing that is certain is, you will still have to get up early. You wake up to the sound of a pig squealing. Not a normal squeal, a panicked, drawn-out sound, as if the world were ending in the pigsty. You jolt up, banging your head against the crossbar, muttering some Roman peasant curse. Not vulgar, but graphic and offensive to rats. You rush out with your hoe, your shoes still on. The pigsty is still there, but a piglet has slipped through the fence and got its leg caught in a tree root, making a loud noise like a sacrifice. You untangle it, coax it with some grass, and carry it back to the pen. Its belly is soft and warm like fresh bread, and its eyes are big and round like silver bars you have never held before. When the dust settles, you return to the house. Your wife is stoking the fire. The smell of damp ash and wood smoke rises, mingling with the scent of her hair, reminding you of the first night you slept side by side in a makeshift shed. You help her break the barley bread silently, hand in hand, neither of you speaking. It's one of those rare, beautiful things that doesn't need to be explained in words. After breakfast, you have to go to the next village today, a 2-hour walk, to barter for some supplies, hemp rope, salt, and if you're lucky, a jar of olive oil. You leave the task to your eldest son, telling him to watch out for the pigs and not to kick any more statues. He sticks his tongue out at you, a promise that promises trouble. You wrap yourself in a worn brown cloak, carrying a basket of raisins, 2 sausages, and some beeswax, all rare items that could be traded for a lot if you met the right person. The road to the other village is not long, but full of potholes and stories. You pass an abandoned plot of land. It is said that it was once the large farm of a veteran returning from a campaign in Germania. He was rich, but his property was confiscated for defying a tax decree. Historians still debate whether the land requisition policies of the time helped redistribute resources more appropriately, or whether the poor became poorer and the rich migrated to Egypt. You arrive in the village just as the morning market is in session. It's not as noisy as a modern market, but it's still strangely lively. The smells of cheese, lamb fat, and dried flowers blend together to create a symphony not for the faint of heart. You encounter a salt seller with fiery red hair and a voice that punches you in the ear every time she shouts her price. After some haggling, you end up with half a bag of salt and a length of hemp rope. There's no olive oil, but you do get a jar of sour vinegar from Hispania, the kind they say can cure everything from stomach aches to broken hearts. You're a little skeptical of the latter. A peddler strikes up a conversation, boasting that he once saw a deer that walked backward in northern Gaul. You smile politely, but then he lowers his voice. "I hear the imperial court is looking for people skilled in weapon making. There may be another war coming." You don't react, but inside you begin to feel a chill. On the way home, you thought about what he had said. Maybe it was just a rumor. Or maybe it was a sign. The war had never really left the empire. It was just taking a break, like a predator stalking from the bushes. When you get home, the sky is starting to get gloomy. It hasn't rained yet, but the wind already carries the scent of wet earth and rotting leaves. You enter the house and find the children arguing over an unusually large beetle. Your wife is just sitting there sewing, her eyes glued to her needle and thread, but her mouth is still strong enough to warn the children with 3 short words. If anyone screams again, you'll have to stay up all night. You hand her the basket. She looks it over, then nods. Okay. You know that's the highest compliment you can get from this woman. That evening, while it was raining lightly, you sat under the porch, holding a cup of diluted wine in your hand, watching the drops of water fall like thousands of coins from the sky, which unfortunately could not be used to buy anything. Canis lies at your feet, eyes half closed. You tell him the story of the red-haired woman and the backward deer. He doesn't respond, just sighs as if he's heard twice as many stories as you've ever heard. When you go to bed, the sound of the rain still falls like an ancient lullaby. You lie there, eyes glued to the thatched roof, your mind drifting with unanswered questions. Will war come? Will you be able to protect your family? Will that jar of vinegar really be able to heal a broken heart? If one day it does break, you have no answer. But then, exhausted by a day of walking nearly 10 miles and a mind struggling with the uncertain future, you fall asleep, as if Morpheus himself had pulled you into a sleep filled with the dust and smell of night rain. You wake up to the sound of the wind howling outside. It's not quite dawn yet, but the pale red light of dawn is already filtering through the cracks in the roof, cutting across the room like a knife of fire. You sigh. East wind. That means a hard day's work and not a speck of shade. Canis was already awake, sitting by the door as if he knew something was coming. You followed his gaze. Today was the first harvest of the barley field, a food that made no poetry, but kept the stomach fuller than the dreams. You quickly eat some leftover bean porridge from yesterday. Swallow it like a soldier swallows orders. Then shoulder your sickle, basket, and an old rope. Your son follows, sleepy-eyed but steady-footed like someone who has been used to the rhythm of work since he was bottle-fed. In fact, he only stopped when he discovered that salty cheese tasted better. The barley fields stretch out before you, the stalks knee-high, glistening in the morning sun. You kneel down and cut the first bundle. It feels familiar, but each time feels new, like you're still not used to living without worries. You work in silence, your hands quick, the sickle gliding like a steel snake through the grass. Each cut bundle is tied neatly and stacked. As your son works, he secretly drops a few grains of barley on the ground, muttering for the gods. Part of you finds this cute, part of you feels it's a waste. But let him keep his faith, because you know you have no patience for that anymore. Mid-morning, a neighbor named Severus stopped by to say hello. He brought some strange news. Someone had come from the provincial capital to talk about a new technique for storing barley without it going moldy. A mixture of ashes and honey, mixed into each layer of grain as it was stacked. Historians today are divided on whether it actually worked or was just a honey-selling gimmick. But Severus was convinced and ordered 10 jars. You nod politely, but in your mind you think, honey is better for eating. After all, the remaining jars of honey in your house are only used on 2 occasions, holidays and when you have severe diarrhea. The wind picks up in the early afternoon, carrying dust and distant clanging. You look up and see a group of horsemen approaching from the direction of the provincial capital. They are not fast, but they are clearly purposeful. One of them is wearing a pale purple cloak, the color of the administrative class. You tell your child to stay put, and you step to the edge of the road to watch. As the caravan passes, the man in purple stops and asks you in a monotone voice, "Is this the land belonging to Marcus Flavius's villa?" You reply that it is not. The villa lies to the west, across 2 streams and a flock of irritable geese. He thanks you and continues on, but his eyes linger a little too long on your granary. You return to the fields, your heart beating slower, but you still feel something building, like a cough that hasn't yet started. Sometimes you wish you could understand what the government is thinking, but then you remember, even the people in the government don't understand themselves. So, who are you to ask? You and your son continue harvesting until the sun reaches its zenith. Sweat soaks through your shirt. You strip it off, leaving your chest bare, your skin sunburned brown as toast. Canis rolls in the shade, his tongue out, looking at you and your son with a look that says, "I told you so." During your lunch break, you eat dry bread, dip it in water, and sit and watch the rice fields. You remember your childhood, when your father sat in the same place, cutting rice, sighing after each swing of the sickle. You realize that you have become a duplicate of him. Same movements, same tired taunts, same back that is getting more painful with age. By afternoon, the barley piles are as high as little hills. You tie the ropes around the bundles, your back aching as if kicked by a mule. But you keep going, because if you don't collect it all today, tomorrow it might rain, and all your hard work will be washed away in the ditches, never to be recorded in history books. That evening, when everything is put away, you come home with a cut on your hand and a pounding headache. Your wife makes you some diluted vinegar, the strange drink Roman soldiers used to quench their thirst. It tastes like a kiss from someone you don't like, sour and memorable. You sit on the porch, watching the sky darken. The children play near the chicken coop, their laughter mixed with their cackling. A quiet night is about to begin, and you are too tired to worry about tomorrow. But before you go to sleep, you ask your wife, "Do you think we should try preserving the rice with honey?" She looked at you, then said, "The honey is for the youngest child's birthday." Another way of saying, "Don't be foolish." You nodded, accepting that the wisdom of a roadkeeper was more valuable than gossip. You lie down, eyes closed as your back aches, and in the night wind you still hear Severus's words, "Ashes and honey." You think, perhaps, what you need more is a layer of protection for your heart from being worn away by the same repetitive days. You wake up to the rustling of a light morning rain. The steady patter of water on the thatched roof sounds like a slow lullaby, making you want to sleep a little longer. But work awaits. Your farmland cannot sit still, cannot wait for the rain to pass, so you can start working. You step outside, your bare feet feeling the soft, moist ground. The air is cool, with the scent of fresh earth and rotting straw. Raindrops gently hit your face, cold as ice cubes in a wine bottle. You regain your focus, pick up your hoe and knife, and prepare to work in the mustard field. Cabbage is a staple of your family's diet. It doesn't taste like much, but it's sure to add some green to your plate. You begin to dig into the soil, your hands working steadily and rhythmically, like the way you used to watch blacksmiths build fires in their metal workshops. A historical fact flashed into my mind. Ancient Rome had a highly developed irrigation system, using aqueducts, giant aqueducts that carried water from the mountains to the cities. But in your hometown, that system is just a book. But in reality, you have to watch every drop of rain to water your crops. As you work, a stranger appears at the edge of the field, a man in a dark blue robe, mysterious in appearance, carrying a small bag. He introduces himself as a scholar, collecting information on traditional farming methods. You ask him why he's interested, and he smiles mysteriously and says that historians debate whether Roman agriculture was truly sustainable, or just a stepping stone to the population explosion that eventually brought the empire down. You are surprised by that statement. As we talk, He pulls out a scroll and shows you a drawing of a new plow, one that can double your productivity. But he warns, not everyone is ready to change the traditional ways their grandparents have passed down. You think carefully, even though you still like simple, traditional things. If you could do more in a day, you might have more time to play with your children, or simply to rest. The scholar leaves after the exchange, leaving you with heavy thoughts. You wonder, will your children continue to do the same thing you are doing? Or will someone change things? You return to your work, tilling the soil, watering with a small bucket. The rain continues to fall steadily, bringing a refreshing coolness. You look up at the sky, remembering the scholar's story about the aqueducts, and tell yourself, even though you are only a small part of the vast Roman world, you are also contributing to the gears of history. At night, after a simple dinner, you sit by the fire, watching the flames dance like little ghosts. The chirping of insects outside creates a natural symphony in the background. You tell your family the story of the scholar and the new plow, making the children curious and their eyes light up. You end the day with a tired but satisfied smile. Tomorrow, you may continue on the same path, but at least today you open the door to a wider world, a world that may be different, but is worth the wait. The dew still lingers on the fields as you slowly walk out of the house, an old shovel in your hand. Last night you heard dogs barking, people whispering. Someone seems to be approaching. You are not surprised. People wander through this area from time to time. But what makes you wonder is that they not only pass by, but also stop near the house. You look around and see a small group of people gathered around a small fire, their faces smeared with mud, the firelight reflecting off their haggard faces. They're not local farmers. They look like blacksmiths or soldiers. There's a chuckle and a few small conversations. You remember, in Rome, groups like this would gather to tell war stories or discuss politics, things not everyone would hear. You approach quietly and find an old man telling the story of the Battle of the Teutoburg River, a battle in which the Roman Empire lost 3 legions to Germanic tribes. A famous historical event. You have heard that historians still debate whether it was the end of Roman expansion in the north or just a temporary setback. The old people talk of long roads, towering stone fortresses, and the bravery and defeat of Roman soldiers. You find yourself drawn into the story, imagining the battlefield, not in a tragic way, but as a classic play reenacted by the light of a crackling fire. You suddenly recall the funny story of the young soldier who mistook his helmet for a wash basin and ended up running around camp with his helmet askew, causing the entire army to laugh. You think to yourself that, no matter how serious history is, humans are still clumsy creatures with plenty of stories to tell. As the morning light gradually rises, the group of people begins to disperse, leaving you alone with a feeling of both strangeness and familiarity. You watch them, wondering what life would be like if you were able to walk like them, telling stories, listening to stories, instead of just hanging around this small field. Before heading home, you stop by the stream and wash your hands and face. The cold water feels like it's going straight into your tired body. You recall another strange story. The ancient Romans had a tradition of bathing in hot water with herbs, both relaxing and healing. But you don't have any baths outside the river, and you don't have time to soak in the fragrant hot water. You take a sip of water, watching the stream flow quietly like your life. A constant flow, full of unexpected twists, untold stories, and unfinished debates. The morning ends with the sound of birds chirping. You return to work, your mind lighter, as if you have just experienced a small adventure right in the heart of your peaceful village. You start your day with the sound of roosters crowing from a nearby coop, the cawing of roosters echoing like a classical piece on repeat. The fog still hangs, softening everything around you, and you feel a gentle chill on your skin as you step out into the wheat fields. Today's work is to prepare for the new planting season. You carry the sack of seeds over your shoulder, your hand still showing the small scars from the previous day's sickle cutting. You remember something interesting. The Romans were very particular about seed selection, believing that sowing the right kind of seed at the right time would result in a bountiful harvest. They even had holidays dedicated to asking the god of agriculture to protect their crops. You start scattering the seeds on the tilled soil, one seed at a time, sometimes closing your eyes to imagine a bright future, a golden field shining in the sun, the wind blowing the rice waves like a blue sea. But then, you chuckle softly when you remember. You still have to worry about stopping the chickens from eating them all before they sprout. As you work, a story you once heard about Roman farmers rising up after years of drought comes back to you. Historians still debate whether minor climatic changes were the main cause of the empire's decline, or whether corruption and civil war were at the root of it all. Either way, it reminds you that nature and humanity are in a constant struggle, and you're part of it. You stop for a moment, watching a sparrow chirp in a nearby tree. These little birds were once considered pests, but the Romans saw them as a sign of good luck. You suddenly feel a small glimmer of hope amid your long, hard days. The day passes with the chirping of birds, the sound of a knife cutting the grass, and the small laughter of your child trying to catch a cricket in the fields. You think of past seasons, of the stories your grandparents told you, and of yourself, who is continuing the endless cycle of Roman peasant life. As the sun begins to set, you and your family gather around the simple dinner table. You tell them about what you learned today, about the story of the sparrow, and about the historians arguing, keeping the children listening attentively. You end your day by going out onto the porch and looking up at the starry sky, remembering the Romans using constellations to navigate and predict the weather. Once again, you realize that no matter how advanced technology becomes, people still need simple beliefs to comfort their souls. The day begins with the sound of the wind rustling through the olive trees. You step outside your house and take a deep breath, the salty scent of the nearby sea wafting through the air. The olive grove stretches out before you, the leaves shimmering like a silvery layer in the early morning sunlight. You know today is an important day, as you must harvest the olives for oil, one of the family's most valuable sources of income. Holding the basket in your hand, you gently shake the branches, and each olive falls, rolling on the ground like little gems. The slight coldness of the fruit in your hand and the distinct aroma of the leaves remind you that olive oil was an indispensable part of Roman meals, used for everything from cooking to skin care. Although you're not sure if anyone in your village uses it for skin care, except for the old lady next door whose secret recipes you've heard about. You hear historians still argue about whether olive oil really helped prolong the lives of the Romans, or whether it's just a myth spun by oil merchants. But either way, in your hands is the real lifeblood of your family, a liquid gold that flows gently between your fingers. In the middle of harvesting, you spot a shiny golden ant on a leaf. It is small but seems to contain a miniature universe inside it, running as fast and fiercely as life itself. You smile to yourself, wondering if ants are harder farmers than you. They never rest, always know how to build nests and store food. When your basket is full, you take it to the olive press, a simple but effective stone structure. The sound of the crushing stones and the smell of freshly pressed oil fill the air, making you feel proud of what you have produced. You think of the ancient tradition where Roman families passed down the art of oil making from generation to generation. You remember the funny story about the farmer who tried to press olive oil with his feet and ended up with oil-stained pants that couldn't be washed out all season. You tell yourself, while it's funny, it's not that easy. The afternoon passes in the sound of laughter and the scent of new oil. You think about the future, about whether your children will continue this profession or switch to the newer, more modern way that scholars have mentioned. You end the day by the fire, listening to the sound of the waves crashing in the distance. Another day has passed, carrying with it your hopes and your own story. A small but resilient farmer in the vast world of Rome. You start your day with the chirping of birds in the fields, first rays of sunlight glistening through the dewdrops on the leaves. Today, you prepare for the rice harvest, one of the most important jobs of the year. You hold a sickle, step by step through the golden rice plants, feeling the gentle breeze blowing across your face. Rice fed the village, and you remember the remarkable historical fact. The Romans developed farming techniques that greatly increased yields, facilitating the expansion of the empire. But historians still debate whether Roman agriculture was truly sustainable in the long term, as overexploitation of the land may have led to soil degradation. You bend down, harvesting the rice sheaves one by one, your hands covered in golden dust. The distinct scent of ripe rice reminds you of warm family meals by the fire. Suddenly, you remember a funny story your neighbor told about the time he got rice all over his head, making everyone think he turned into a walking corn man. You laugh, feeling that today is not much different. In the middle of your work, you hear the laughter of children playing nearby, and your wife's voice calling from the end of the field, reminding you to take a break. You look up at the sky, where white clouds drift gently, like small boats floating on the vast ocean. You think about the endless cycle of the seasons, of life here, from planting to harvesting, from sun to rain, from young to old. You wonder if the ancient Romans ever thought that thousands of years later, people like you would still be working the same way, with hands full of dirt and unwavering faith. The day ends with you and your family sitting around the dinner table, sharing small stories about the day and unfulfilled dreams. You look around, seeing the bright eyes of everyone, the people who will continue this journey with you on this old but vibrant land. You wake up to the sound of the wind rustling through the willows by the river. Today's work involves not just the fields, but also the water. Irrigation was a matter of life and death for Roman farmers. You're off to inspect the canals to make sure your crops don't run out of water. You walk along the trails, the sound of running water in your ears. One historical fact you remember is that the Roman system of sewers and aqueducts was considered an engineering marvel of antiquity, though historians still debate whether the complexity of the system increased the cost of maintenance and led to the abandonment of many rural areas. You reach the source, check the sewers. The canal bed is not broken or blocked. You recall the story of a young soldier who got lost in the Roman sewers, making the whole village laugh when he told of his overwhelming experience. Yes, sometimes the greatest things can be funny. You spend time fixing a few leaks, your hands dirty, but happy knowing that you are helping to protect your crops and your family's lives. You also look up at the sky, wondering if these irrigation techniques really changed the lives of the Roman people as historians say. In the afternoon, you return home, tired but satisfied. Your family is waiting at the dinner table, and you tell them about the repairs you made, about the funny stories you told along the way. You see yourself as part of a long chain of people who keep the land and the villagers alive. At night, you look out the window and hear the steady sound of running water, like a lullaby that never ends. You tell yourself that although life has its difficulties, the connection between humans and nature is still the most precious thing. This morning brings with it the breath of autumn, a slight chill that filters through the leaves and reddens your cheeks as you step out into the fields. This is the last day of the seasonal work you have been through, preparing the land for winter, when everything slowly falls asleep under a thin layer of soil and a chilly wind. You bend down, using your plow and hoe to turn the soil, preparing it for one last sowing before it falls asleep. You remember a striking fact. The Romans developed tools like the iron plow that made tilling the soil much more efficient than before. But historians still debate whether the technology was widely adopted across the countryside or limited to large plantations. You smile as you remember the story of your village friend who tried using a horse to plow instead of an ox, and the horse ran away in the middle of the field, leaving him chasing after it. It was a funny memory that everyone laughed out loud whenever they recalled it. You look up at the sky, see the white clouds drifting slowly, feel the rare peace after a long day of work. You tell yourself, although the life of a farmer is hard, you still feel lucky to live close to the land, to nature, and to your beloved family. In the afternoon, you and your family gather around the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and even small dreams for the coming season. You know that, no matter who you are, no matter what area you are in, simple things like that are always the greatest source of motivation in life. And when night falls, you lie down, feel the gentle wind through the crack in the door, the moonlight sparkling on the thatched roof, your heart gently grateful for another day that has passed, a day of simple but meaningful work. You have spent a full day with me as a Roman peasant. From the bright dawn until the dark night, we have passed through rice fields, olive groves, winding canals, and oil stoves to warm the family. Every moment has the breath of ancient times, where man and nature are closely linked like two sides of a mirror. You've heard light-hearted humor, major historical events like the Battle of the Teutoburg River or Roman irrigation techniques, and historians' ongoing debates about the sustainability and impact of ancient technologies. All of it comes together in a seamless, uninterrupted flow, giving you a deep sense of the life and soul of a peasant in a vast and volatile empire. Your story is also the story of ordinary people, with their joys, sorrows, hardships, and even small dreams for the future. Every task, from sowing to harvesting, from tending crops to preserving water sources, is part of the big picture of life, of the connection between the past and the present. You have been invited to reflect, to laugh, and to feel in the truest sense the rhythm of a distant yet vivid era in your mind. And now, as you prepare to rest, let those images drift quietly into your sleep, carrying you on a dreamy journey.